Hello, YouTube. My name is Greg from GregsTutoringNYC at gmail.com. I'm a tutor in New York City, and I tutor a lot of things. Mostly I specialize in specialized testing. So I might have the SSAT, the ISEE, the Hunter College High School test, and what I'm going to talk about on this YouTube is the SHSAT, the New York City Specialized High School Admission Test. I got hold of the catalog this week, the handbook, for all the things. The catalog is now diminished, but this is now the handbook. So I'm going to talk a few minutes about that. I kind of have mixed feelings because there's been a lot of debate the past few months, really since last June, and it's gotten incrementally more debatable about the SHSAT, about whether it should continue to exist or not. So I was wondering what impact was that debate going to have on the sample questions and the way they did the test in here, because in the past 2 or 3 years they actually modified the test. They made certain efforts to make it be simpler. I feel that's what they did. I've also heard statements to that effect. So I was wondering if that same kind of thing was going to happen. So the question on the table is was there going to be a modification again to the kind of topics that were in the test, the number of questions, all that kind of thing like that. So the lowdown is that so the test is going to be at the end of October next year. That's normally when it is, beginning November, depending on whether you're taking it for the 8th and the 9th grade, etc., etc. There's still going to be the same number of questions. There's going to be 57 questions on each in math, 57 in English. It's going to split up among various things. The math, as it did last year, is going to have 5 grid-in questions, and then the rest are going to be multiple choice. 47 are going to count. The same with the ELA. There's going to be 57 questions. 47 count. The other 10 in each section are field questions. Grading and scoring will still be the same. For some definition, the same, because the New York City Department of Education never releases actually how the test gets scored. We know that ELA is scored separately, and there's some calibration and curving happening. We know that happens with the math, and then they're combined, but there's a lot of wiggle room in how they statistically do that and so on. So there's lots of confusion and things like that, especially in how it might feed into the discovery program, which I'm not going to talk about in this video really, except just to mention that in passing. The other question I had was, so the ELA will also this year also have the revising and the editing question. I think there's maybe 6 questions of that, and then it moves into the reading comprehension stuff. As with last year and recent years, including on the state test, poetry is now a significant aspect, and theoretically more deeper kinds of works, instead of kind of phony passages, some real stuff that was based on real literature and yada yada yada. Okay, so the other aspect of things is not only how was the test changed, which it seems for the most part it wasn't, but how was the debate or just the natural progression of things going to affect the quality of questions that this handbook gives? Okay, now before I answer that, I want to say that I get to look at thousands of test questions every year. Thousands just in the past 12 months, okay? Not just about the SHSAT, although I've gone over every SHSAT question I've ever known to be available, which is hundreds of them. So I get to see thousands of questions. It kind of gets blurry to me because I actually solve so many questions. And I have to put my mindset in the right frame of mind. Am I comparing the questions in this new SHSAT handbook to old SHSAT questions, not some other test? So I think I can assess that properly, but I want to make sure, I just want to put it out there that my thoughts can be biased just based on that. The other issue is that some of this is subjective as well. There's not a computer program to weigh whether one question was really hard or easier than another question. And you can see this reflected the day of the test. That kids say, oh, I thought it was really easy, and somebody, oh, I thought it was really hard. And the truth of the matter is, by the way, if I recall correctly, there's actually 18 versions of the test that are given out every single year. Okay, in fact, this year there may have been more because they had something called SHSAT Day, where 50 schools actually had the test not on a weekend, but during a weekday in their classroom. Okay, so there might be maybe 19 or 20 or 22 or something by now. In any event, By the way, let me just check that this live stream is actually happening. Okay, it seems to be going okay. I lost my train of thought. In any event, some of this is subjective and so on. There's another issue, which is that the more problems I personally solve on some of all these various tests, the easier it all gets for me. So with that in mind, let me tell you my first thoughts here about what I'm seeing in this handbook. Specifically, only this handbook I'm talking about. So the overall snapshot of everything is that the ELA section seems to be as hard as it was last year, and maybe harder. Okay, I didn't read every ELA question. I've looked about maybe a little over a third of them right now. Right, the handbook comes with 2 samples. I did about a third. I skipped around, and actually there's some hard questions in it. So give them that. Okay. On the flip side, the math section to me seems explicitly easier. So again, this is all framed in the reference what my non-disclaimer a couple of minutes ago, that it could be me, but it seems to me the math questions were made easier. There's more and more talk about the SHSAT following the Common Core Grade 7 curriculum, and that was never the goal of the SHSAT. So I don't know why they're watering it down with wording and actually implementation of stuff. In fact, the revising and the editing, the addition of the grammar to the test reflects that. So, so in any event, there's some of the harder questions don't seem to be there anymore. Some of the multi-step questions that sometimes had 3, 4, 5 steps to them now seem to have fewer steps to them. Some of the stuff just seems to be trivial stuff, and it wasn't in SHSAT years and years ago. By the way, some of this was added last year as well, where there was very simple algebra things that were really not testing anything. Another thing I don't like in the math section of this reference, and by the way, it's a kind of a running theme also with all the SHSAT handbooks, is that they give sloppy explanations instead of the explanation being founded in, say, an algebraic perspective or a mathematical approach. Sometimes the answer is almost like here's the brute force way to do it, and this is why it works. And by the way, this is part of why people never really like the ELA questions, even on the state test, because some of them you can rationalize out to have like multiple directions to take. So it becomes a tough nut to crack. All right, is really one thing here. But again, my overall assessment is the ELA seems as hard, if not harder. I'm comparing it only to last year, or let's say the last 2 years. And the math seems easier, and it might be one of the easiest ones I've seen in a while. Now that said, tests do ebb and flow, and by that I mean is some years. Let's take the SAT as an example. There will be easier SATs. In other years, there will be harder SATs. So it could be that this is just the way this handbook turned out, and that on test day, the SHSAT might be as hard as it ever was. Okay? So that's the good news and the bad news of this all. If people want more information, hopefully you're going to get your handbook soon. Hopefully it'll be online soon as well, so you can actually see what I'm talking about and start working out your strategies for this. I'm a tutor. I have lots of insights into this test. I would love for you to meet to be your tutor. But in any event, if you have questions, you can email me at GregsTutoringNYC@gmail.com, and we can figure things out from there. I do interact with lots of people who are not my students. I enjoy tutoring. I enjoy helping people. I enjoy the whole process. I think the specialized high schools are unique schools. They're not the only schools in the world. So this is a high-stakes test, but if you make it the end of the world, you're probably doing it for the wrong reasons. So please take this test for good reasons, and you need to start preparing now for it. I'm a graduate of Brooklyn Tech. When I went to Brooklyn Tech, nobody did test prep. Now it's standard. It's the way to do things day to day, even for the state test. When I was a boy, only failing kids got tutors. Now everybody has tutors, and it was even a curve I had to go through. Like if you're doing well, why do you need a tutor? Actually, it makes sense. And it's something like this. The competition's too high, and you really don't want to not get in because of 1 or 2 questions. Maybe the way it should be done is not the way the grading is currently done. That's another story. The truth of the matter is, a point is a point. And the truth of the matter, even further than that, is I don't even tutor to give you points. I tutor to have you understand the math and understand the English. And if you do both of those things, your score is going to follow. Okay? Yes, I tutor about test-taking skills. Yes, you should worry about test-taking skills. Yes, you should worry about other skills that are not taught to you. This is a unique test that you normally don't see day to day in class. Think the New York State test, which is also not what you don't see in class, also not reflecting it 100%. And it's just bumped up a few levels. You want to be creative, you want to be thinking out of the box, you want to be accelerated, you want to be like a sponge, intellectually just absorbing everything. And you should approach this test that same way. Let me think if I kind of missed some things here. And by the way, this is not to say that all the math questions were easy. There is some hard questions. There's also questions, as in anything, where you're going to make silly errors because you're not totally focused. But again, it ties back, do you have mastery of the subject? And by the way, I said I went through about a third of the English ones. I believe I went through all the math examples for grade 8. I still need to look at the grade 9 ones. I haven't looked at the grade 9 ones at all. Okay? So that's my assessment, that there's kind of the good and the bad of it, and that at the end of the day, no matter what it is, you need to study hard, and at the end of the day, this is just a snapshot, and on the real test day, it could be very, very, very different. I'm still curious, though, because my original inclination of getting a copy of this was not only to tutor my own students, but to see how are things affecting the specialized high schools. Again, getting back to that debate and really seeing what's going to make sense here, what's not going to make sense here, what changed, what didn't change, and even if nothing changed, what is the future for specialized high schools? Okay, so hopefully everybody has a good day. It's Sunday at 4 o'clock. I'm, as some of you may or may not know, I do many videos, some where I just talk to you about general stuff like this. Some gets philosophical, some is about how to prepare, and some is actually nitty-gritty, like working through a state test, working through past SHSATs, things like that. I have hours and hours and hours of YouTubes where we're going through actually doing problem solving. Some is for earlier grades. There's a whole bunch of grade 7 and grade 8, which is really the predecessor, the prerequisite for doing SHSAT work. Okay, so subscribe to my channel, and you can see when I post new stuff. I'll probably go through some examples of this starting this week. We'll have to see, but in any event, peace out, everybody. Have a great day.